General Hospital spoiler reveal that Willow's mind becomes a closed room, with no air the moment she realizes that Drew has remembered everything. Not fragments or distorted flashes, but the single truth she built her fragile freedom upon. She was the one who pulled the trigger. This realization does not arrive as a sudden explosion, but as a slow, suffocating pressure that seeps into every corner of her thoughts, turning ordinary moments into traps and silence into something actively hostile. From that point on, Willow no longer fears discovery in the abstract. She fears Drew himself, not for what he might say, but for what he now knows and how deliberately he chooses to wield that knowledge. Drew does not confront her with rage or demand justice. Instead, he adjusts the story, reshapes reality with calculated calm, and uses the truth as leverage. He makes it clear that her secret survival, her clean verdict, her fragile hope of reclaiming her children, all exist only because he allows them to. The power dynamic shifts so completely that Willow barely recognizes her own life anymore. She becomes trapped inside a relationship that is no longer even pretending to be built on trust, but on coercion disguised as intimacy. Drew forces her into a version of love that feels staged, controlled, and relentlessly conditional, where every gesture of affection is demanded rather than offered, and every refusal carries the unspoken threat of exposure. Willow begins to understand that Drew is not trying to destroy her quickly. He is trying to own her slowly. This realization feeds a new kind of obsession, darker than guilt and more corrosive than fear. She becomes hyper-aware of her own behavior, policing every word, every expression, every emotional response, terrified that even the smallest crack might prompt Drew to tighten his grip. Sleep becomes elusive, filled with looping memories of the gunshot and the unbearable awareness that survival did not mean escape, only a more elaborate prison. Drew's manipulation grows more precise as he rewrites the narrative around them, presenting their relationship to the world as proof of forgiveness, reconciliation, and enduring love, while privately reminding Willow that none of it is real and all of it can end the moment she stops complying. This constant psychological pressure begins to fracture Willow's sense of self. She is no longer certain where her choices end and Drew's demands begin. Her identity as a mother, as a survivor, as someone who once believed in redemption, erodes under the weight of forced devotion and unrelenting blackmail. Willow starts to spiral, her thoughts racing ahead to imagined catastrophes, to courtroom doors reopening, to her children looking at her with confusion or fear, to a future that collapses the instant Drew decides he has extracted everything he wants from her. The cruelty of the situation lies not only in Drew's control, but in the way it weaponizes Willow's own desperation. He knows she will endure almost anything to protect her children, and he uses that knowledge without hesitation. As the days pass, Willow's emotional regulation deteriorates. She swings between numb compliance and flashes of reckless anger, between moments of chilling clarity and stretches of near dissociation. The truth that once felt like a secret safely buried now feels alive, breathing, pacing inside her head, demanding resolution. Willow becomes haunted not just by what she did, but by what she is being forced to become, someone who performs love as survival, who trades authenticity for silence, who remains standing only by surrendering pieces of herself she knows she will never recover. Drew's calm presence becomes unbearable, his patience more terrifying than open cruelty, because it signals that he is always in control, always watching, always waiting. Willow begins to lose her grip on the illusion that the situation can remain stable. She understands, on a visceral level, that blackmail does not end on its own, that love built on fear metastasizes, that control always escalates. This awareness pushes her toward the edge of rationality, where every option feels catastrophic and every delay feels like slow annihilation. Her thoughts darken, her planning becomes erratic, and the internal boundaries she once relied on begin to dissolve. Willow is no longer simply afraid of being exposed. She is afraid of herself, of what this constant pressure might force her to do next. The more Drew tightens his hold, the more Willow feels something inside her unravel, as if the part of her that once believed she could stop, repent, and rebuild is being replaced by a colder instinct focused solely on escape at any cost. In this psychological battlefield, Willow is not just losing control of the narrative. but of her own internal compass, and as the obsession deepens, it becomes terrifyingly clear that something is going to break, because a truth used as a weapon can never coexist peacefully with a mind already stretched to its limit. Willow feels the hatred grow inside her like a living organism, something that wasn't there before, but has been slowly fed by every look, every silence, every calculated move Drew makes to remind her that he owns the truth and therefore owns her. What began as panic has hardened into rage, and the rage has sharpened into something far more corrosive, a kind of venom that spreads through her thoughts until she can no longer differentiate fear from fury. Each day Drew keeps her under his control. Each time he forces her to participate in the false narrative of their relationship. Each moment he reminds her that freedom is only allowed when he grants it. The hatred intensifies, wrapping itself around her reason like thorn vines. She begins to replay their interactions in her head, but the focus shifts. She no longer sees herself as the trembling figure desperate to hide a secret, but as someone being smothered, pushed against a wall, stripped of her ability to choose. The memory of pulling the trigger the first time does not haunt her the way it once did. Instead, it flickers like a signal fire, illuminating a path she had once abandoned, but now finds herself inching toward again. The more Drew manipulates her, the more the idea of shooting him resurfaces, not as a nightmare, not as a source of guilt, but as a potential solution, a door in a room with no windows. It begins quietly as intrusive thoughts she tries to shake off, but they keep returning, stubborn, persistent, evolving from imagination into possibility. The plan forms itself in her mind long before she admits it to herself, and by the time she recognizes what she is thinking, the thought is already rooted too deeply to remove. She begins to picture what it would feel like to lift the weapon a second time, to steady her hands not with fear but with determination, to pull the trigger not in confusion but with intention. These thoughts terrify her, but they also give her an intoxicating sense of control, a feeling she hasn't experienced since Drew regained his memory and turned her life into a psychological cage. Willow's days become a haze of suppressed panic and simmering fury. She moves through the world as if wearing a mask made of trembling glass, convinced it will shatter if Drew pushes her even slightly harder. He seems to sense the growing instability in her, and instead of backing off, he tightens his grip, forcing her into intimate gestures she does not want, conversations she despises, and a twisted performance of love that makes her skin crawl. He whispers reminders of what she did, what he knows, and what he can expose. Each reminder is a blade dragging across her nerves, and with each cut, she feels less like she is being blackmailed and more like she is being hunted. The more he corners her, the more Willow feels her mind slipping into a dangerous space where empathy, fear, and morality dissolve into a single, overriding instinct: survive at any cost, even if survival requires blood. She starts imagining scenarios, rehearsing them the way Drew forces her to rehearse their counterfeit affection. She imagines confronting him, but in her mind, the confrontation always ends the same way: Drew falling, the truth dying with him, and Willow finally inhaling a breath that does not taste like terror. She imagines the recoil of the gun, the echo of the shot, the stillness that follows. Her imagination becomes a refuge, a place where she is no longer controlled, no longer tormented, no longer trapped in the distorted fantasy Drew constructs around them. And slowly, the imaginary blends with the real. She finds herself studying Drew in a new way, observing the rhythms of his movements, the patterns of his day, the moments when his guard is down. She notices when he is alone, when he is distracted, when he talks too much, when he underestimates her. Each observation becomes fuel for her growing intention. She keeps these thoughts silent, buried under layers of forced smiles and feigned compliance, because she knows Drew is always waiting for signs of rebellion. He thrives on her fear, and she refuses to give him the satisfaction of sensing her rage. Instead, she channels every ounce of instability into stillness, storing the madness like a coil ready to snap. But the pressure inside her grows, and the madness becomes harder to contain. Her sleep becomes fragmented, dreams melt into hallucinations. She hears her heartbeat pounding in her ears at strange moments, feels adrenaline spike in her veins even when she's standing still. She starts losing track of what she has said, which lies she has already told, what version of herself she has shown Drew on any given day. Her internal world cracks under the strain, and the hatred spills through the fractures, flooding everything. At times, she feels almost possessed by her own fear, as if her mind is urging her toward the violent escape she has tried so hard to deny. She begins to resent herself for not shooting him cleanly the first time, for hesitating, for allowing him the chance to rise again and transform into the monster now tormenting her. The self-loathing mixes with the hatred until it becomes impossible to tell them apart. The more unbearable her internal chaos becomes, the clearer her thoughts of killing Drew crystallize. It no longer feels like madness, it feels like necessity. The idea no longer frightens her, it steadies her. It becomes the one thought that brings coherence to her fractured mind. She stops questioning whether it is right or wrong. The only question that matters now is when. And as that question grows louder, her perception of Drew changes again. She no longer sees him as someone capable of destroying her, but as someone whose existence is now optional. Someone whose presence in her life persists only because she hasn't yet acted. This shift is subtle at first, but soon it becomes the foundation of her reality. Every room they share becomes a battlefield she is slowly reclaiming. Every step he takes toward her becomes another reason to pull the trigger. Every breath he draws feels like a violation of her freedom. She starts to imagine the moment not with fear but with relief, as if the act of ending him is not a sin but a release, a purging of the poison he has injected into her life. The thought becomes so consuming that it starts to eclipse everything else. She cannot focus on conversations, cannot feel the world around her, cannot even look at her own reflection without seeing the growing shadow behind her eyes. This is not a temporary breakdown. This is a complete shift in who she is. The person she used to be, the gentlewoman, the mother fighting for her children, the survivor trying to rebuild, begins to dissolve, replaced by someone colder, sharper, more dangerous. And the scariest part is that Willow does not fight this transformation anymore. She embraces it because it is the only part of her that still feels real. The hatred, the obsession, the violent resolve, they are the only things that give her a sense of agency in a world where Drew has taken everything else. By the time she begins to truly plan the second shooting, the madness inside her is no longer something she wants to escape. It feels like clarity, like purpose. She tells herself she is not becoming a monster. She is reclaiming the life he stole from her. The more she believes this, the more unstoppable she becomes. And as the tension coils tighter inside her mind, as her hatred matures into intent, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. Willow is no longer afraid of pulling the trigger. She's afraid of what will happen if she doesn't. Willow's unraveling finally reaches its breaking point on the night she decides she can no longer live another hour under Drew's shadow. The hatred inside her has calcified into something feral, something that overrides fear, reason, and every moral boundary she once tried to cling to. When she lifts the gun a second time, it is not with shaking hands or confused panic, but with a chilling steadiness. That makes the moment all the more catastrophic. But the moment Drew sees her, he understands instantly because he has sensed the storm building inside her for weeks. He tries to step back, tries to stall, but Willow is already too far gone. Her mind has fused violence with freedom, and every breath Drew takes feels like an intrusion that must be stopped. She fires once, then again, not aiming with precision, but with rage that spills out in frantic bursts. The gunshots echo through the room like cracks in her sanity, and for a few seconds Willow genuinely believes she has silenced him forever. But the neighbors hear, security responds, and within minutes officers swarm the space, dragging her away while she is still screaming that he deserves it, that he should have let her go, that she was finally trying to take her life back. Instead of fleeing, she fights them, wild-eyed, desperate, as if the arrest itself is another cage Drew has forced on her. Her voice breaks between sobs and fury, her body thrashing as though the only thing she understands anymore is the need to finish what she started. Drew, bleeding on the floor, is barely conscious but not dead. It is almost grotesque how fate spares him again, pulling him back from the edge for the second time, as though the universe is determined to keep him alive no matter how many bullets Willow fires. Doctors later say he survived by inches, by timing, by sheer luck, but the truth lies deeper than that. Drew's becoming a kind of living symbol in this twisted dynamic, a figure that refuses to disappear no matter how violently Willow tries to erase him. His survival becomes another adjustment in this ongoing nightmare, a shift that transforms the entire balance of control once again. And even from a hospital bed, Drew senses at the shift in power. The way his near-death paints him as the victim in the eyes of the law, the courts, the public, while Willow becomes the threat they always suspected lived behind her calm facade. With Willow in custody, restrained and trembling under the weight of what she's done, Drew suddenly holds more leverage than ever before. He no longer needs to manipulate her in shadows. The system will now do the work for him. Her arrest grants him a new kind of authority, one backed not by whispered threats, but by legal weight. But there is an eerie horror in how Drew reacts when he wakes. There is no relief in his eyes, no gratitude for survival, only a strange, cold, almost predatory awareness, almost as if nearly dying again ignites something dark inside him too. It becomes clear that the obsession binding them has mutated on his side as well. Instead of letting go, instead of seeking protection, Drew becomes fixated on the fact that Willow wanted to kill him more desperately than she wanted to save herself, and he finds that intoxicating, terrifying, yes, but also intoxicating. Willow's downfall, her unhinged attempt on his life, becomes a new kind of power he never expected to have. The world now sees him as the vulnerable one, the wronged one, the man she nearly killed twice. And Drew realizes he can use this narrative, shape it, bend it the same way he bent Willow's fear before. His survival becomes his new weapon. Willow's arrest becomes his shield. Their fractured connection evolves into something even darker. She becomes the woman who tried to kill him. He becomes the man she can never escape, not even behind bars. And as Willow sits in a holding cell, replaying the moment she failed to fire the final shot, the obsession does not fade, it intensifies. She did not eliminate him, and now he lives again, stronger than before, wrapped in public sympathy and legal protection that makes him untouchable. Drew's survival becomes her newest nightmare, the latest adjustment in a story that refuses to end. And somewhere deep inside, Willow knows this is far from over. Drew knows it too. Their hatred, their fear, their twisted dependency has turned into something neither prison walls nor hospital monitors can contain. This is no longer just a story of bullets and blackmail. This is a psychological war that will keep reshaping itself, dragging both of them deeper into madness. Alexis feels the shock tear through her like a violent tremor the moment she steps into the room with Scout. A moment that should have been grounding, but instead becomes a collision of fear, relief, and disbelief. Scout clings to her with a trembling intensity that says more than any words could. And Alexis understands, deep in her bones, that everything they feared, everything they tried to outrun, has finally erupted into something too large to ignore. The stories surrounding Drew and Willow, the violence, the manipulation, the shattering revelations, all of it has seeped into Scout's world like a poison, staining every corner of her young mind with confusion and dread. Alexis can see it in the way Scout's eyes flicker with questions she's too afraid to ask, in the way her shoulders tense whenever someone mentions the past, in the way she looks at Alexis as if needing confirmation that she is finally safe. This is the exact moment Alexis realizes the situation has spiraled so far beyond anything she once tried to rationalize. The new adjustments, law enforcement stepping in, psychiatric evaluations, custody reviews are no longer vague possibilities, but immediate realities. Each legal shift feels like a shockwave, pushing the story further into territory no mother ever wants to navigate. Alexis has been preparing for this battle for weeks, gathering evidence, documenting instability, proving over and over again that Scout deserves stability, deserves peace, deserves a life untouched by the chaos that others have inflicted. And when the ruling finally comes granting Alexis full custody, she feels something inside her collapse, not from weakness, but from the sheer emotional force of victory mixed with grief for everything Scout has endured. For Scout, the decision is both a salvation and a revelation. She may not understand the mechanics of custody, the legal jargon, the procedural weight of it all, But she understands safety. She understands the way Alexis wraps her into an embrace that feels immovable, untouchable, like a fortress built just for her. She understands that whatever darkness consumed Drew, whatever violence Willow unleashed, whatever instability has been ripping through their family, Alexis is the one anchor left standing. But the relief comes with its own shock. Scout has watched adults lose control, watched trust fracture, watched the world she once believed was solid crumble beneath her. Even as Alexis tries to shield her, Scout senses the magnitude of what has changed. The way everyone moves with urgency now, the whispers, the glances, the tension thick enough to press against her skin. For Alexis, the custody ruling marks a turning point, one that explodes through her life with a mixture of triumph and terror. She wanted this victory, fought for it, bled for it in ways only a mother could understand. But winning custody also forces her to confront the truth. She is now the sole barrier between Scout and the chaos that still lingers. And that responsibility ignites something fierce inside her, something sharper than fear and unbreakable resolve. The more she learns about Willow's unraveling, the more reports she receives about Drew's condition, the more she watches the legal system shift and twist around their collapse, the more she realizes this is not simply a family crisis, but a battlefield she must navigate with precision. The emotional explosion that follows is not just personal, it radiates outward. Sam, Danny, Jason, Sonny, they all feel the shockwave as Alexis shifts into full protective mode. Every decision she makes now carries a gravity that pulls others into its orbit. She becomes a force that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be slowed, cannot be ignored. And for the first time, Scout sees her mother not just as a protector, but as someone fighting a war on her behalf, a war that seems to expand with each passing day. The ruling also sends ripples through Port Charles. People whisper about what it means, what it suggests about Drew's mental state, about Willow's violent spiral, about the danger they posed not just to each other, but to the children caught in the crossfire. And through it all, Alexis stands in the center, holding onto Scout as though she is the only truth left in a world collapsing under the weight of too many secrets. But the most explosive part of this shift isn't legal or social, it's emotional. The moment Scout whispers, barely audible, "Are we really safe now?" Alexis feels the world tilt again. Because safety isn't a verdict, isn't a ruling, isn't a signature on a piece of paper. Safety is something she must create, moment by moment, breath by breath. And she knows the storm isn't over. Drew is still alive. Willow is unraveling inside a cell. And Port Charles is a town where buried truths have a way of clawing their way back to the surface. Yet for now, Alexis holds Scout tighter, grounding both of them as everything around them continues to burn and shift. This custody victory marks the beginning of a new phase of dangerous, volatile, but deeply necessary recalibration. And as the world continues to spiral in ways neither of them can fully see yet, one thing becomes unmistakably clear. Alexis has stepped into a new kind of power, and she will use it relentlessly to protect Scout from every shadow still looming in the aftermath of Willow and Drew's destruction.